Good morning, Knights. This is Mrs. Hackensmith. Today is Tuesday, May 26th. I hope you enjoyed your day off of school yesterday. It was nice to have a little bit of a break. Today on the Matrix, it tells us that we are going to read Ruby the Copycat. All right, so this is a book that we're going to read. But before we read that, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about the story. All right, so I have my chart here. So Ruby the Copycat, the genre is realistic fiction. Realistic fiction means that the story is a fictional story, but it has things in the story that really could happen. So that's why they call it realistic fiction. The focus of our story today, it says a key point for understanding is Ruby's real life problem of feeling so unsure of herself that she copies others she sees. So even though this is a fiction story, she has a real life problem. Her real life problem is that she moves to a new school and she's unsure of herself. And I'm sure if any of us have moved to a new school, we have felt unsure being with all of these people that we don't know, and we want them to like us and include us and accept us. And I think that's how Ruby's feeling, and she doesn't quite know how to act at the beginning when she meets everyone. It says, then she finds out about her own unique talents. So then she finds out about something that she has that is all her own. We have the word unique. We're going to talk about that word a little bit later on. So some of the vocabulary that you're going to see in the story, the first one is coincidence. A coincidence is when two or more things happen at the same time without any planning. I know that I have been up north for vacation in the summertime, and I have run into people downtown shopping when I'm up north, 5 hours up north, and I run into people from Austin. So they are at the same place that I am, and we didn't even plan it. That is a coincidence. Or I know Mrs. Lunning and Mrs. Mickelson, they sometimes wear the same type of outfit because they are such good friends. I don't know if their minds just think that way, but they'll both come with like the same colors or the same type of outfit on to work. And they don't plan it, so that is a coincidence. Loyal is another vocabulary word. A person is loyal when they are always willing to support you and be your friend. Even if they think you're wrong, they're still going to be there to support you. They have your back. They're always going to be there for you. That is a loyal friend. They don't just run away from you and not support you. Okay, so if somebody is loyal, they are always there for you, no matter what. The next vocabulary word is recited. When you are reading or saying something out loud in front of people. When we have our poetry days, I will ask you to recite the poem. You can recite it by reading it, or even if you memorize it, you can recite it when you've memorized it. But reciting is to say something or read something out loud, and you do that when you are reading your poetry. And then the last one I said we'd get back to is unique. Unique is being the only one of its kind, unlike anything else. And each and every one of you are unique. There's something special that only you have, and each and every one of you have that uniqueness. And that's what Ruby finds out today in our story. She finds out that she has a uniqueness, something that is all her own. Okay, I'm going to read the back blurb before we read it. It says, Ruby is a copycat. On the day Angela wears a red bow in her hair, Ruby returns from lunch wearing a red bow in her hair too. Fortunately, Ruby has a very perceptive teacher who helps Ruby discover her own creative resources, which keep Ruby literally jumping for joy. And we'll find out what that means when we read the story. So, Ruby the Copycat by Peggy Rathman. Remember, realistic fiction? This is a fictional story, but it could happen. Monday was Ruby's first day in Miss Hart's class. Class, this is Ruby, announced Miss Hart. Ruby, you may use the empty desk behind Angela. Angela is the girl with the pretty red bow in her hair. Angela smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Angela's bow and tiptoed to her seat. I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend, said Miss Hart. Does anyone have something to share? I was a flower girl in my sister's wedding, said Angela. Well, that's exciting, said Miss Hart. Ruby raised her hand halfway. I was a flower girl at my sister's wedding, too. What a coincidence. They both had weddings. They were both flower girls on the same weekend? What's a coincidence? Asked Miss Hart. Angela turned. What a coincidence, said Miss Hart. Angela turned and smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at the top of Angela's head. Class, please take out your reading books, said Miss Hart. Do you think it really was a coincidence? Do you think really that Ruby was a flower girl in her sister's wedding? We'll see. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped all the way home on one foot. Wow, she's a pretty good hopper, isn't she? When Ruby came back to school, she was wearing a red bow in her hair. She slid into her seat behind Angela. I like your bow, whispered Angela. I like yours too, said Ruby. Class, please take out your math books, said Miss Hart. So, Angela isn't upset that Ruby copied her with the bow. Not at this point. Sometimes if somebody copies you, it's kind of a form of flattery because it means that they like what you've done. So sometimes it can be a compliment. On Tuesday morning, Angela wore a sweater with daisies on it. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped home sideways. She's a good hopper. Oh, so look at how she is when she comes back. When Ruby came back to school after lunch, she was wearing a sweater with daisies on it. I like your sweater, whispered Angela. I like yours too, whispered Ruby. So Angela is still thinking that this is a compliment and it's okay that she has kind of the same thing. On Wednesday, Angela wore a hand-painted t-shirt with matching sneakers. After lunch, Ruby hopped back to school wearing a hand-painted t-shirt and matching sneakers. Why are you sitting like that? Whispered Angela. Wet paint, said Ruby. So she went home and made a shirt in her shoes to match Angela's. Now that's getting kind of a little crazy, isn't it? Yeah. On Thursday morning during sharing time, Angela modeled the flower girl dress. So this is what she wore in her sister's wedding. Ruby modeled her flower girl dress too, right after lunch. Angela didn't whisper anything. So here's Ruby's flower girl dress. Does that look like it was made for her? Looks kind of big, doesn't it? So do you think she was telling a fib about her sister's wedding and being a flower girl in it? Notice this time, Angela didn't say anything. Sometimes if somebody copies you too much, you tend to get a little upset with it because you just want to have things that are your own and are unique. So, I mean, it's okay a little bit, but not every day. That gets to be a little annoying. So I think maybe Angela's feeling a little annoyed right now. By coincidence, on Friday morning, both girls wore red and lavender striped dresses. So on Friday, they actually did wear the same dress on Friday. It was a coincidence. Remember when two things happen at the same time, but you didn't plan it? Well, at lunchtime, Angela ran home. What do you predict she's going to do? Maybe change her clothes? When Angela came back to school, she was wearing black. Look at her facial expression. She doesn't look very happy. I don't think she likes it that Ruby's copying her anymore. On Friday afternoon, Miss Hart asked everyone to write a short poem. Who would like to read first? Asked Miss Hart. Angela raised her hand. She stood by her desk and she read. I had a cat I could not see because it stayed in back of me. It was a very loyal pet. It's sad we never really met. That was very good, said Miss Hart. Now who's next? Miss Hart looked around the room. Ruby? Ruby stood and recited slowly. So she's going to read out loud to everybody. I had a nice pet who I never met because it always stayed behind me. And I'm sure it was a cat, too. That sounds a little familiar. I think we've heard those words before, maybe just in different order. Ruby smiled at the back of Angela's head. Someone whispered. Ruby sat down. What a coincidence, murmured Miss Hart. Do you really think she thinks it's a coincidence? Angela scribbled something on a piece of paper and she passed it to Ruby. The note said, You copied me. I'm telling Miss Hart. P.S. I hate your hair that way. So now she's getting a little grumpy, isn't she? Ruby buried her chin in the collar of her blouse. A big tear rolled down her nose and plopped onto the note. When the bell rang, Miss Hart sent everyone home except Ruby. So I think Miss Hart can see what's going on here. So Miss Hart closed the door of the schoolroom and she sat on the edge of Ruby's desk. Ruby, dear, she said gently, you don't need to copy everything Angela does. You can be anything you want to be, but be Ruby first. I like Ruby. Miss Hart smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Miss Hart's beautiful, polished fingernails. Have a nice weekend, said Miss Hart. Have a nice weekend, said Ruby. What do you predict's going to happen next? She's looking at those fingernails. On Monday morning, Miss Hart said, I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend. I did. I did. I went to the opera. Miss Hart looked around the room. Does anyone have something to share? Ruby waved her hand. Glued to every finger was a pink plastic fingernail. I went to the opera too, said Ruby. She did not, whispered Angela. So she's not copying Angela anymore, but who is she copying? Miss Hart. She's copying the teacher. Miss Hart folded her hands and looked very serious. Ruby dear, said Miss Hart gently, did you do anything else this weekend? Ruby peeled off a fingernail. I hopped, said Ruby. The class giggled. Ruby's ears turned red. But I did. I hopped around the picnic table 10 times. Ruby looked around the room. Watch. She's feeling a little embarrassed, I think, and she wants to prove to them that, yes, she really can hop. Ruby sprang from her desk. She hopped forward. She hopped backward. She hopped sideways with both eyes shut. The class cheered and clapped their hands to the beat of Ruby's feet. Ruby was the best hopper they had ever seen. Miss Hart turned on the tape player and said, "Follow the leader. Do the Ruby hop." So Ruby led the class around the room while everyone copied her. And at noon, Ruby and Angela hopped home for lunch. So I think this story teaches us to be happy with who you are and to do what you do, what you like to do. Find what you are good at and be yourself. So today I'm going to have you go to your memory book, and I want you to open up to the page where it says, I am unique. There's that word again, unique. And I'm going to have you fill this out and then put it on Seesaw so that I can see it. It says, my full name is, and you can do your first, your middle, and your last. Something that makes me special is, what is something that you are really good at doing? A talent that you have. What is something that makes you special? If Ruby was in my class, I would want to copy, if Ruby was in my class, she would want to copy how so if Ruby had come to our class at Nevlin and she was new, what is something that maybe she would copy from you? So think about something special. What would she copy from you? And then it says, I love being who I am because. So I want you to tell me, why do you love yourself? It's very important that we love ourselves and that we are happy and proud of who we are. So this page is all about thinking about what makes you special, what are you good at, and why do you love yourself? So go ahead and share that. And then you're going to draw a picture of wonderful me. So you're going to draw a picture of yourself. Now, if you want to draw the whole body, you can. Or if you just want to do the bust, remember the bust is the shoulders up, you can do that. So go ahead. This is your reading assignment for today. Finish the I Am Unique page in your memory book. And if you are able to, put it on Seesaw, and don't forget to read it to me. Sometimes it's hard for me to read your writing because I can't see it on the camera. So go ahead and read it. I love to hear your voice. Alrighty. So that was Ruby, the copycat. I'm going to move over now to the book camera for our math lesson. So go ahead and get your math papers, page 626 today. See you in a minute. Okay, here we are. All right, so for our math lesson today, we're doing lesson 6. It says do guided practice numbers 1 through 3 on page 626 in your math packet, and then tell a family member your answer to the talk math question. Now, we're also going to be talking about AM and PM today. Mrs. Mickelson likes to say AM means at morning, and PM means past morning. So that's kind of a nice way to remember it. The A is for at morning, and the P is for past morning. I am going to tell you the scientific meaning, though, of AM and PM. So for AM means ante-meridium. Ante means before. Meridium means midday. So before midday or in the morning. Okay? Midday is 12 o'clock noon. Midday means right in the middle of the day. So that's 12 o'clock noon. So AM is any time from midnight until 12 noon. Okay? So I'm going to put that on there. We're going to do midnight to 12 o'clock noon. That's when we eat lunch. Okay, so that any time during that time, like 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning after midnight, that is all AM. And then once you hit midday, 12 o'clock, then we start PM or post meridium. Post means after. So after midday. So anything after midday is 1 o'clock after lunch, 2 o'clock after lunch, all the way until midnight. And then once you get to midnight, that's when the AM starts over again. And then once you get to noon, that's when the PM starts. Alrighty. So let's take a look at 625. We're going to talk about AM and PM. So we have the AM. It's not always when it's light out, because 1 o'clock AM is right after midnight when it is dark. So you can't think about when it's light or dark. Just think about any time before lunch is AM. Any time after lunch is PM. Okay, so the directions tell us, think of things that you do during the day and at night. Draw pictures of the activities on the correct side of the page. Alrighty, you can either draw pictures or you can just write it out. Let's think about 3 things we do in the AM and 3 things we do in the PM. Alright, so in the AM, I definitely wake up. Okay, that's one thing I do. I eat breakfast. Okay, that's another thing I do. And I record during distance learning. I record my video. Okay, so I wake up, I eat breakfast, I record my video. I do all of these things before lunchtime. Now, PM, post meridium, means after lunchtime. So after lunchtime, this is when I make my phone calls. if I have any phone calls to make to you guys. So that's when I make my phone calls. I eat dinner. I also cook the dinner. Okay, I eat dinner and I go to sleep at the end of the day. Okay, so these are 3 things I do in the AM and 3 things I do in the PM. And the divider is noon. Okay, before noon, after noon. Alrighty, so go ahead and write down your 3 things that you do. If you want to put them on Seesaw, you are more than welcome to. Alrighty, let's turn it over to 626. Let's do the guided practice together. It says the hours from midnight until noon are labeled AM. The hours from noon until midnight are labeled PM. So 12 o'clock PM is lunchtime. 12 o'clock AM is midnight. Okay? So go to school, 8 o'clock AM. Okay, we've got the hour hand on the 8, the minute hand directly up there on the 12. That means 8 o'clock. Read a bedtime story, 8 o'clock PM. Okay, so afternoon, and then right here, this would be our noon line, right? So before noon is when we go to school. After noontime is when we get ready for bed. Tell what time it is shown for the activity. Write the time. Circle AM or PM. Okay, so look at number 1. Number 1 says art class. Remember what time we went to art class? We went to art class. It was a little after 10, but it was around, no, it was after 9, wasn't it? It was a little after 9. All right, so we're pretending we're going to art class at 10 o'clock. The hour hand is pointing to the 10. The minute hand is straight up on the 12. So that means it is 10 o'clock. Now, would we go to art class at 10 o'clock in the morning? Or would we go to art class at 10 o'clock at night? We would go to art class 10 o'clock in the morning. We would go at 10 o'clock before lunchtime. Because after lunchtime, 10 o'clock at night, that would be when we're supposed to be sleeping. Okay, look at number 2. Go to bed. Take a look at the hour hand. It's halfway between the 8 and the 9. So that tells us we go back to the smaller hour. That tells us it's 8 o'clock. And our minute hand, let's count by 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So remember, when our minute hand is halfway around the clock, that's 8:30 or 30 minutes after 8. Okay, so 8:30 a.m. That's when we're just starting school. 8:30 p.m. That is when we would be going to bed. So going to bed would be 8:30 p.m. All right, let's take a look at the yellow one. Play after school. Well, the hour hand is pointing at the 4, and the minute hand is straight up at the 12 again. So that tells us it is 4 o'clock. All right, now, is it 4 o'clock a.m. in the morning or 4 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon? Yes, if we were playing after school, that would be 4 o'clock p.m. after school. All righty. Now, the talk math, how can you remember if it is a.m. or p.m.? Well, like Mrs. Mickelson says at morning or past morning. Another way you can remember it is in the alphabet. If we do alphabetical order, the A comes before P in the alphabet, so that AM is the morning and the PM is the afternoon. So that's another way you can remember it. A comes before P in the alphabet, morning comes before afternoon, so AM means morning, PM means afternoon. Alrighty. Okay, we're going to keep practicing this in our days to come. So your math is done, except for doing the math in your world. Go ahead and write down 3 things that you do in the morning, 3 things that you do in the afternoon, and then your in your memory book, do your page about you are unique. And then you can upload those to Seesaw, and I will love to read and hear you read them to me. Thank you. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.